Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, watching the alien world grow larger on the main screen. His hands were steady on the control panel, but his heart was beating fast. This was it. The moment humanity had been waiting for since they first looked up at the stars. "Sir, we're getting a signal from the planet," said Dr. Amy Carter, the ship's language expert. She was a small woman with bright eyes who had spent 3 years learning what little they knew about the Zephyrian language. "They're telling us." "Where to land?" Jake nodded and looked around the bridge. His crew was small but good. There was Lieutenant Ben Rodriguez at the weapons station, though Jake hoped they wouldn't need weapons today. Sophie Lang sat at the engineering controls, her fingers dancing over the buttons like she was playing music. These 3 people were all that stood between humanity and either a new friendship or a terrible war. "Take us down, Sophie," Jake said. Quietly, the ship moved through the pink clouds that covered Zephyros Prime. As they broke through, Jake saw something that took his breath away. The city below looked like it was made of glass and light. Tall towers twisted up into the sky, glowing with soft colors that changed as they watched. Gardens floated in the air between the buildings, held up by some kind of force Jake didn't understand. "It's beautiful," Amy whispered. "It's also completely alien," Ben added, his soldier's eyes scanning for threats. "Look at those energy readings. This whole city is powered by something we've never seen before." Jake knew Ben was right. To be careful, the Zephyrians were old. Their star empire had existed for thousands of years before humans even learned to make fire. They had technology that seemed like magic and powers that humans could only dream of. The ship landed on a platform that appeared to be made of solid light. Jake could see it was strong enough to hold their weight, but it still felt strange to trust something that looked like it might disappear at any moment. "Remember," Jake told his crew as they prepared to leave the ship, "we're not just representing ourselves. We're representing all of humanity. Every choice we make here could change the future for everyone back home." Amy checked her translation. "Device one more time." Ben made sure his uniform was perfect. Sophie grabbed her tablet full of technical data about human achievements. Jake took a deep breath and opened the ship's door. The air outside was warm and smelled like flowers Jake had never experienced before. 3 figures waited for them on the platform. They were tall and thin, much taller than humans, with skin that seemed to glow from within. Their eyes were large and silver, and they moved with a grace that made Jake feel clumsy in comparison. "Welcome to Zephyros Prime," the center figure said. The words came not from its mouth, but directly into Jake's mind. The voice was cold and formal, like someone reading from a script they didn't care about. "Thank you for having us," Jake replied out loud. He had been told that the Zephyrians could understand spoken words, even if they preferred to communicate. With their minds, the Zephyrians' eyes flickered with something that might have been annoyance. "You may call me Counselor Vex. I will take you to the palace where you will meet our leaders." They walked through the city, and Jake tried not to stare. Everything was so different from Earth. The buildings seemed to respond to the presence of the Zephyrians, doors opening before they reached them, lights growing brighter as they passed. Other aliens moved through the streets, all with the same glowing skin and silver eyes, but Jake noticed something strange. None of them looked at the humans with curiosity. Instead, they seemed to look through them, as if humans were not worth noticing. "They don't seem very interested in us," Sophie whispered to Jake. "Maybe that's a good thing," Ben replied quietly. "Better to be ignored than to be seen as a threat." The palace was the most amazing building Jake had ever seen. It rose up into the clouds like a mountain made of crystal, with light flowing through its walls like water. Inside, the floors were transparent, and Jake could see gardens and pools of light far below his feet. They were led into a great hall where dozens of Zephyrians waited. At the far end of the room, on a throne that seemed to be carved from a single giant diamond, sat a figure that could only be the Emperor. Even from a distance, Jake could feel power radiating from him like heat from a fire, but it wasn't the Emperor who caught Jake's attention. To the right of the throne stood a young Zephyrian woman, and unlike all the others, she was looking directly at him. Her skin glowed brighter than the rest, and her silver eyes seemed to change color as he watched. Where the others showed no interest, her face showed something Jake couldn't quite identify. Curiosity, maybe, or confusion? Humans, the Emperor's voice filled Jake's head like thunder. You have come far to reach us. We are told that you seek alliance with our empire. Jake stepped forward, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. Yes, your majesty. Humanity offers friendship to the Zephyrian people. We believe our species could learn much from each other. A sound filled the hall that Jake realized was laughter, but it felt cold and mocking inside his mind. Many of the Zephyrians seemed to find something funny about Jake's words. Learn from each other? The Emperor's gentle voice was full of disbelief. Tell me, human, what could a species as young as yours possibly teach us? We have traveled the stars since before your son was born. We have powers of the mind that you cannot imagine. We can share thoughts and feelings as easily as you share breath. Jake felt his crew tense beside him. This was not going as they had hoped, but he had faced difficult situations before. Your Majesty, humanity may be young, but we have achieved much in our short time. We have survived ice ages and plagues. We have built cities and created art. We have reached for the stars despite having no natural ability to fly. Survival is not achievement, another Zephyrian counselor projected dismissively. Even the lowest animals survive. What makes you think you have anything to offer beings such as ourselves? Jake was about to respond when he felt something different. It wasn't the harsh mental voice of the Emperor or the cold dismissal of the counselors. It was gentler, more careful, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping person. You interest? Me, human. Jake looked toward the throne and saw that the young woman was watching him intently. Her silver eyes had turned a deep blue, and she was leaning forward slightly, as if trying to see him better. Ah, the Emperor's voice carried a note of amusement. It seems my daughter finds you curious. Princess Lirley, what do you make of these creatures? The princess stepped forward, and Jake could see her more clearly now. She was beautiful in a way that was completely alien but somehow familiar at the same time. Her face was shaped differently from a human's, with larger eyes and sharper features, but there was something in her expression that reminded Jake of people he had known. Intelligence, perhaps, or kindness. They are closed, she said, and Jake realized she was speaking out loud instead of using telepathy. Her voice was musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. I cannot sense their emotions. It is as if they feel nothing at all. Exactly, the Emperor agreed. They are empty of true feeling. How can beings without emotional depth be worthy of our attention? Jake felt his heart sink. He was starting to understand the problem. The Zephyrians judged worth by the ability to share emotions telepathically. Since humans couldn't do that, they appeared emotionally dead to the aliens, but Princess Lirley was still watching him, and Jake thought he saw something in her eyes that gave him hope. She tilted her head slightly, like someone trying to solve a puzzle, perhaps, she said slowly. There is more to them than we can see. The next morning, Jake woke up in the guest quarters the Zephyrians had given them. The room was beautiful but strange, with walls that glowed softly and furniture that seemed to float just above the floor. He had barely slept, his mind racing, with thoughts about the meeting with the Emperor. Amy was already awake, sitting at a table made of some kind of crystal, working on her translation notes. Good morning, Commander, she said without looking up. I've been thinking about what the princess said yesterday. About us being closed? Jake asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee from the machine Sophie had insisted they bring from Earth. Yes, I think I understand the problem now. Amy finally looked up, and Jake could see the excitement in her eyes. The Zephyrians don't just communicate with telepathy. They actually share emotions directly mind to mind. When they can't sense our emotions, they think we don't have any. Ben walked in from the next room, already dressed in his uniform. So, what do we do about it? We can't suddenly develop telepathy. I don't know yet, Amy admitted. But there has to be a way to show them that we do feel things, even if we can't project them telepathically. Sophie entered the room carrying her tablet, her hair messy from sleep. "I've been monitoring their communications," she said. "The Emperor is meeting with his council this morning. They're deciding whether to even continue talking to us." Jake felt a cold weight in his stomach. "How long do we have?" "The meeting starts in an hour. After that, they'll either invite us to formal negotiations or ask us to leave." Jake stood up and straightened his uniform. "Then we better hope Princess Lirelei meant what she said about there being more to us than they can see." An hour later, they were back in the Great Hall, but this time the atmosphere was different. The Zephyrians, who had seemed merely uninterested yesterday, now looked openly dismissive. Some of them didn't even bother to look at the humans as they entered. The Emperor sat on his crystal throne, his face showing no emotion at all. Princess Lirelei stood beside him, but today she seemed more distant, more like the other Zephyrians. Only her eyes, which had turned a pale green, suggested that she was still curious about the humans. "We have discussed your request for alliance," the Emperor began, his mental voice filling the hall. "The Council has reached a decision." Jake felt his crew tense beside him. This was it. "Councillor Thane will explain our position," the Emperor continued. An elderly Zephyrian stepped forward. His skin was dimmer than the others, and his silver eyes had a cold, hard look. "Humans," he projected, "we have observed your species for some time. We have watched your wars, your violence, your destruction of your own world. But most importantly, we have seen your emotional poverty." Jake wanted to interrupt, to defend humanity, but he knew he had to let the counselor finish. "A true civilization is built on the sharing of feeling, the connection of mind to mind and heart to heart. You show none of this capacity. You are like machines that look like living beings. How can we trust creatures who feel nothing? How can we ally with beings who have no depth of emotion?" The counselor's words hit Jake like physical blows. He could feel his crew's anger and frustration, but he also felt something else, a determination that seemed to burn in his chest. "Therefore," Counselor Thane continued, "we must decline your offer of alliance. We suggest you return to your home world and perhaps contact us again when your species has evolved beyond its current emotional limitations." The hall fell silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. All around him, the Zephyrians waited for his response, most of them already dismissing the humans as a failed experiment. But then Princess Lirelei spoke. "Wait." Every eye in the hall turned to her. She stepped forward, her skin glowing brighter. "Than before, Father, I request the right to speak." The Emperor's mental voice carried a note of surprise. "This is unusual, daughter. The decision has been made." "I know," she said, still speaking aloud instead of using telepathy. "But I have been watching these humans more closely than the others. I believe we may be making a mistake." Jake felt a spark of hope, but he tried not to let it show on his face. "Explain," the Emperor commanded. Princess Lirelei looked directly at Jake, and he saw that her eyes had turned a deep blue again. "These humans do feel, Father. I cannot sense their emotions with my mind, but I can see them with my eyes. Watch the way they stand together, protecting each other. See how the leader keeps himself calm even when he is clearly worried about his people. Notice how the female with the knowledge works even when she is tired, because she cares about her mission." Jake realized she was talking about Amy, who had indeed been working late into the night. "These are not the actions of emotionless beings," the princess continued. "These are the actions of creatures who feel deeply but show it through their behavior rather than their thoughts." Counselor Thane made a dismissive gesture. "Behavior can be learned. True emotion comes from the heart and mind together." "Can it?" Princess Lirelei turned to face the counselor. "Then let me propose a test." The Emperor leaned forward on his throne. "What kind of test?" "Give me 3 days alone with these humans. Let me try to understand how they express their emotions. If I can prove that they do feel deeply, then perhaps we should reconsider our decision." The hall erupted in mental voices, all the Zephyrians talking at once. Jake couldn't understand the telepathic conversation, but he could see some of the aliens shaking their heads while others seemed to be considering the princess's words. Finally, the Emperor raised his hand for silence. This is highly irregular. We do not normally waste time on species that have already been judged. But what if our judgment is wrong? Princess Lirale asked. What if we are missing something important about these humans? Would it not be worth 3 days to make sure? The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. Jake could feel sweat running down his back, but he forced himself to stand perfectly still. Everything depended on this moment. Very well, the Emperor said finally. You may have your 3 days. But understand, daughter, if you cannot prove that these humans have true emotional depth, they will be asked to leave immediately, and we will not consider any future contact with their species. I understand, father. The Emperor's silver eyes fixed on Jake. And you, human leader, do you accept this challenge? Will you allow my daughter to judge whether your species is worthy of our attention? Jake looked at his crew. Amy nodded slightly. Ben's jaw was set in determination. Sophie gave him a small thumbs up. These people trusted him to make the right choice. We accept, Jake said clearly. Then it is decided. The Emperor stood up from his throne. Princess Lirale, you have 3 days. Do not waste them. The hall began to empty as the Zephyrians filed out, most of them still looking skeptical. Jake and his crew were left alone with the princess. She approached them slowly, her skin still glowing with that soft light. Up close, Jake could see that her eyes were not just one color, but seemed to shift and change like liquid silver with hints of blue. You have agreed to let me judge your species, she said, her musical voice quiet in the now empty hall. But first, I must understand something. Why do you hide your emotions? Why do you not let others see what you feel? Jake thought about her question carefully. We don't hide our emotions, princess. We control them. There's a difference. Show me, she said, and Jake realized this was the same challenge she had given him the day before, but now it had become a test that could determine the future of human-alien relations. Show you what? He asked. Princess Lirale stepped closer, and Jake could smell something like flowers and starlight on her skin. If you feel something, she said, her blue eyes looking directly into his, show me, human. Show me what your emotions look like when they are not hidden behind your closed minds. Jake took a deep breath. 3 days to prove that humanity was worth knowing. 3 days to show an alien princess that humans were not emotionless machines, but beings who felt as deeply as any creature in the universe. All right, he said quietly. I'll show you. The first day of the test began early. Princess Lirale arrived at the human quarters just as the sun was rising over the crystal city. She wore a simple robe that seemed to be made of liquid light, and her eyes were a curious shade of purple that Jake had not seen before. I want to understand how you express feelings, she said without any greeting. Show me something from your world that demonstrates emotion. Jake had been thinking about this all night. He looked at Amy, who nodded and pulled out a small device from her bag. It was a music player, one of the few personal items they had been allowed to bring. This is music, Amy said, pressing a button. The soft sound of a piano filled the room, followed by a human voice singing a sad, beautiful song about love and loss. Princess Lirale tilted her head, listening carefully. The sounds are pleasant, she said after a moment, but I do not understand how this shows emotion. Listen to the words, Amy said gently. The singer is telling a story about someone she loved who went away. She's expressing sadness, longing, hope. The princess closed her eyes and listened more carefully. Jake watched her face as the song continued, seeing her expression change slowly. When the song ended, she opened her eyes, and they had turned a deep blue. The singer, she said quietly, she was in pain when she made these sounds. Yes, Amy said, but she turned her pain into something beautiful. That's what humans do with difficult emotions. We transform them into art, music, stories. Princess Lirale was quiet for a long moment. Among my people, if we feel sadness, we share it directly with others. They feel our pain and help us carry it. But this human, she carried her pain alone and made it into something others could experience without sharing the burden. One way to think about it, Jake said. The princess looked at him with those shifting eyes. Show me more. Over the next few hours, Jake and his crew shared different aspects of human culture. Sophie showed her pictures of Earth, explaining how humans had built cities in deserts and on mountains, how they had created gardens in the harshest places, how they had reached for the stars despite having no natural ability to fly. Why do you do these things? The princess asked, studying a picture of a human city at night all lit up with millions of lights. Because we dream, Sophie said simply. We imagine things that don't exist yet, and then we work to make them real. But why do you need to dream? Why not simply accept what is? Sophie smiled. Because what is isn't always good enough. We dream of better things, and then we make them happen. Ben showed her pictures of human soldiers but not fighting. Instead, he showed her photos of military people rescuing flood victims, delivering food to hungry children, building schools in poor countries. These are your warriors? The princess asked. Yes, Ben said. But we don't just fight, we protect, we help, we serve. Why would warriors spend their time building schools? Ben thought for a moment. Because we believe that protecting people means more than just fighting their enemies. It means helping them have better lives. Princess Lirale studied the pictures. For a long time, your warriors feel responsibility for people they have never met. That's right. Even when those people cannot help them in return. Especially then. The princess's eyes shifted to a golden color. This is ... strange to me. My people care for each other because we share thoughts and feelings. But you care for strangers. We care for strangers because they're not really strangers. Amy said, they're people just like us. They have families, dreams, fears. We can imagine what it would be like to be them. You can imagine being someone else? Yes, it's called empathy. We can't feel what others feel directly, like you can, but we can understand it with our minds and hearts. The princess stood up suddenly and walked to the window. Outside, the crystal city sparkled in the afternoon light. I need to think about this, she said. I will return tomorrow. The second day was different. Princess Lirale came back with questions, lots of them. She wanted to know why humans cried when they were sad, why they laughed when they were happy, why they hugged each other when they were afraid. When I am sad, she explained, I share my sadness with others and they help me feel better. But you cry alone? Why? Sometimes we need to cry alone, Amy said. It helps us process our feelings. But we also cry with others. When someone we love is hurt, we cry with them. Show me, the princess said. Amy looked uncertain. I can't just cry on command. Then tell me about a time when you cried. Amy was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. When I was a child, I had a dog named Max. He was my best friend. When I was sad, he would sit with me. When I was happy, he would run and play. When he got old and sick, I stayed with him at the end. I held him and cried because I knew I would miss him. As Amy told her story, Jake could see tears forming in her eyes. The princess watched with fascination. You are crying now, she observed. Yes, even though it happened years ago, I still feel sad when I think about losing Max. But why do you choose to remember something that causes pain? Because the pain is part of the love. I wouldn't want to forget Max, even if remembering him makes me sad sometimes. Princess Lirale reached out slowly and touched one of Amy's. Tears, this water comes from your emotions. Yes, and you let others see it, sometimes when we trust them. The princess's eyes turned that deep blue again. You are trusting me with your pain. Yes, but I am a stranger, an alien. Amy smiled. Through her tears, you asked me to show you our emotions. This is what they look like. That evening, Princess Lirale asked Jake to walk with her through the palace gardens. They walked in silence for a while, past glowing flowers and fountains that sang with soft music. Your people confuse me, she said finally. How so? You feel things as strongly as we do, but you bear those feelings alone. You care for people you have never met. You remember pain because it connects you to love. You transform suffering into beauty. She stopped walking and turned to face him. Why do you choose to live this way? Jake thought about her question. We don't really choose it. It's just how we are. We're social creatures, but we're also individuals. We have to find our own way to balance caring for others with taking care of ourselves. It seems like a difficult way to live. It can be, but it's also rewarding. When we help someone, we do it because we choose to, not because we're forced to by shared emotions. When we love someone, it's a decision we make every day. Princess Lirelei was quiet for a long time. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about controlling emotions rather than hiding them. Yes? I think I understand now. You feel things just as strongly as we do, but you have learned to choose how to respond to those feelings. That's right. So when you are afraid, you can still act bravely? Yes, and when you are angry, you can still choose to be kind. We try to. And when you are sad, you can still work to make things better. That's the idea. Princess Lirelei stopped, walking, and looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Tomorrow is the last day of the test. I must give my judgment to the Emperor. Jake felt his heart speed up. What will you tell him? She turned to look at him, and in the starlight her eyes seemed to glow with their own light. I will tell him that I have learned something important about strength. What's that? That sometimes the strongest thing you can do is to feel everything and keep going anyway. The next morning, the third day, Princess Lirelei arrived with several other Zephyrians. Jake recognized some of them as members of the Emperor's Council, including the hostile Counselor Thane. These counselors have come to observe, the princess explained. They want to see for themselves what I have learned about human emotions. Jake felt nervous but tried not to show it. Everything depended on this final demonstration. Very well, he said. What would you like us to show them? Princess Lirelei smiled, and Jake noticed that her eyes had turned a warm gold color. I want you to show them what happens when humans face something impossible. Before Jake could ask what she meant, alarms started blaring throughout the palace. The crystal walls flashed red, and Jake could hear the sound of explosions in the distance. What's happening? Ben demanded, his soldier instincts kicking in. One of the Zephyrian counselors spoke directly into their minds, his mental voice filled with panic. The palace is under attack. A group of extremists from the outer colonies. They oppose any contact with alien species. Through the window, Jake could see ships firing at the palace, their weapons sending cracks through the crystal walls. In the distance, he could see Zephyrian civilians running for shelter. We need to get you to safety, Jake told Princess Lirelei, but she shook her head. No, this is perfect. Show them, Jake. Show them what humans do when everything falls apart. Jake looked at his crew. Amy was already pulling up building schematics on her tablet. Ben was checking his sidearm. Sophie was scanning for structural damage to the palace. All right, Jake said quietly. Let's show them what we're made of. The explosions were getting closer. Jake could feel the crystal floor shaking under his feet as the enemy ships attacked the palace. Through the large windows, he could see Zephyrian civilians running in panic, their glowing skin flickering with fear. Commander, Ben said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Orders? Jake looked at Princess Lirelei. Her eyes had turned bright silver, and he could see she was communicating telepathically with someone, probably her father or the palace guards. The other Zephyrian counselors stood frozen, their faces showing confusion and terror. Princess, Jake said firmly, where are the civilians taking shelter? She blinked and focused on him. There are safe rooms in the lower levels of the palace. But the attackers are trying to reach them. Our guards are fighting, but they are outnumbered. How many civilians? Nearly 300? Mostly families. With children? Jake felt something cold and determined settle in his chest. This was exactly the kind of situation where human training and human nature came together. Amy, I need you to find the fastest route to those safe rooms. Sophie, can you figure out which parts of the palace are structurally sound enough to hold under attack? Already on it, Amy said, her fingers flying over her tablet while explosions continued outside. Got it, Sophie said, her scanner beeping as she checked the walls. The eastern wing is taking the most damage, but the central corridors should hold. Ben was already moving toward the door. What about weapons? We're going to need more than sidearms if we're going to help. Princess Lirley watched all of this with growing amazement. You want to help our people? But this is not your fight. These attackers are trying to kill you specifically. They're trying to kill innocent people, Jake said simply. That makes it our fight. Counselor Thane, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. His telepathic voice was sharp with disbelief. This is madness. You are 4 beings against dozens of armed attackers. You cannot possibly succeed. Maybe not, Jake admitted. But we have to try. Why? The counselor's mental voice was genuinely confused. Why would you risk your lives for people you have never met? People who are not even your species? Jake stopped and looked at the counselor. Around them, the sounds of battle were getting louder, but he took a moment to answer the question properly. Because it's the right thing to do, he said. Because those people are scared and need help. Because we have skills that might save lives. Because if we don't try, we'll never be able to live with ourselves. Princess Lirley's eyes had turned that deep blue again. You're afraid, she said quietly. I can see it in your faces, in the way you move, but you are going anyway. Yes, Jake said. This is what you meant by controlling emotions rather than hiding them. This is what it looks like. Another explosion shook the palace, and Jake heard the sound of crystal walls cracking. Amy, that route? Take the main corridor to the central lift, then down to level 5. From there, it's a straight path to the safe rooms. Sophie, can you keep monitoring the structural integrity as we move? Already programmed my scanner to alert us if anything's about to collapse. Then, you're with me on point. Amy and Sophie, stay close. Princess, I need you to guide us and translate if we meet any civilians who don't speak our language. I will come with you, she said firmly. Princess, Counselor Thane projected urgently. This is too dangerous. Your father will never forgive us if something happens to you. Then you should help us make sure nothing happens to anyone, she replied, speaking aloud instead of using telepathy. They moved out into the corridor, and Jake immediately saw the challenge they faced. The beautiful crystal walls were cracked and sparking. Emergency lights flashed red and blue. In the distance, he could hear the sound of energy weapons and the crash of falling debris. This way, Amy said, leading them toward the central lift. As they moved through the palace, Jake noticed something. The Zephyrian counselors who had come to observe were following them, but they looked terrified. They kept stopping, freezing up when they heard loud noises, communicating frantically with each other through telepathy. They're scared, Princess Lirley explained, noticing Jake's glance. My people are not used to violence. We settled our conflicts through shared emotion centuries ago. Physical danger is something we rarely face. But you're not freezing up? Jake observed. No, I am learning from you. They reached the central lift, but it wasn't working. The crystal shaft was cracked, and sparks were flying from the control panel. Stairs, Ben said, finding a narrow staircase that spiraled down through the palace. As they descended, they started encountering Zephyrian civilians. Families huddled together, their skin flickering with fear. Children crying while their parents tried to comfort them. Elderly Zephyrians who couldn't move quickly enough to reach safety. Tell them we're here to help, Jake said to Princess Lirley. She spoke in the musical Zephyrian language, and Jake saw the relief on the civilians' faces. Some of them looked surprised to see humans helping them, but none of them refused the assistance. Amy, Ben, start helping the injured and the elderly down the stairs. Sophie, keep checking for structural damage. I'll take point and scout ahead. For the next hour, they worked their way through the palace, helping Zephyrians reach safety. Jake carried an elderly alien who couldn't walk. Amy helped a family with young children navigate the damaged corridors. Ben supported a wounded guard who had been hurt in the fighting. Sophie guided groups around areas where the walls were about to collapse. Princess Lirley watched everything with growing wonder. You are tired, she said to Jake as they paused on one of the landings. I can see it in your faces. You are afraid? Worried about your own safety, but you keep going. People need help, Jake said simply. But you could have stayed in the safe room. You could have waited for the attack to end. We could have, but we didn't. Why? Jake thought about how to explain it. Because we've been in situations like this before. Maybe not exactly like this, but close enough. We know what it's like to be scared and need help. We know what it's like to hope someone will come for you. So you help because you understand their fear. We help because we choose to, because it's who we want to be. Princess Lirelei was quiet for a moment. Earlier you said you control your emotions rather than hide them. I think I understand now. You feel the fear, but you do not let it control your actions. That's right. And you feel compassion for these people, even though they are strangers, even though some of them have been dismissive of your species. Yes, this is what you call strength. Jake looked at her, seeing something new in her expression. What do you call it? I am beginning to think, she said slowly, that my people have been wrong about many things. They finally reached the safe rooms deep in the lower levels of the palace. The areas were crowded with Zephyrians, but they were secure. The crystal walls here were thicker, and the attackers hadn't been able to reach them. As Jake and his crew helped the last group of civilians into safety, Princess Lirelei pulled him aside. The attack is ending, she said. The palace guards have driven off the extremists, but I need to tell you something. What? This attack was not random. The extremists chose today because they knew you were being tested. They wanted to disrupt any possible alliance between our species. Jake felt a chill. So this was our fault. No, she said firmly. This was their choice. But do you understand what this means? They attacked during your test because they were afraid of what might happen if my people accepted yours. They were afraid we might actually prove we're worth knowing. Yes, and you did prove it. Not just to me, but to all the counselors who watched you today. They saw you risk your lives for people you barely know. They saw you stay calm under pressure. They saw you work together without telepathy, coordinating through trust and training. Jake looked around the safe room, where his crew was still helping Zephyrian families settle in. Amy was using her medical training to treat minor injuries. Ben was helping organize the civilians into groups. Sophie was checking the room systems to make sure they would hold. We just did what anyone would do, he said. Princess Lirelei's eyes turned that warm gold color again. No, Jake, you did what humans do. And I think it's time my people learned the difference. She walked to the center of the room and raised her voice, speaking in both Zephyrian and human languages so everyone could understand. My people, she said, today you have seen something remarkable. You have seen beings who feel as deeply as we do, but who have learned to transform their emotions into action. You have seen courage that does not come from shared thoughts, but from individual choice. You have seen compassion that extends beyond blood and species. The room fell silent. Zephyrians and humans alike listened to her words. I came here 3 days ago thinking I would test whether humans have emotions. Instead, I learned that they have something even more valuable. They have the ability to choose what to do with their emotions, even in the darkest moments. She turned to look at Jake. Tomorrow, I will tell my father that humanity has passed every test that matters. Not because they can share their feelings telepathically, but because they can share their strength freely. Jake felt something warm spread through his chest, relief, pride, hope all mixed together. But more than that, he felt something The great hall looked different the next morning. The crystal walls had been repaired overnight, but Jake could still see thin lines where the cracks had been. It reminded everyone of what had happened during the attack. The Zephyrian counselors who filled the hall looked different too. Where, before they had seemed cold and dismissive, now many of them watched the humans with something that looked like respect. Emperor Valdris sat on his diamond throne, his silver eyes unreadable. Princess Lirelei stood beside him, her skin glowing brighter than Jake had ever seen it. The other counselors, including the once hostile Counselor Thane, waited in a semicircle around the throne. Princess Lirelei, the Emperor began, his mental voice filling the hall. You have had 3 days to study these humans. The Council waits for your judgment. Are they worthy of alliance with our empire? Princess Lirelei stepped forward. For the first time since Jake had met her, she looked nervous. Her eyes shifted from silver to blue to gold, before settling on a deep, steady green. "Father," she said, speaking aloud so the humans could understand, "I began this test thinking I would determine whether humans have emotions. What I discovered is far more important." She turned to face the assembled counselors. "I learned that there are different kinds of strength. We Zephyrians share our emotions freely, drawing power from our mental connections. We thought this made us superior to species that cannot share thoughts. We were wrong." A murmur ran through the hall as the counselors communicated telepathically among themselves. Jake couldn't hear their mental conversation, but he could see some of them looking surprised or confused. "The humans do feel deeply," Princess Lirelei continued, "but they have learned something we have not. They have learned to choose their response to emotions rather than being controlled by them. When they are afraid, they can still act with courage. When they are angry, they can still show kindness. When they are sad, they can still work to help others." Counselor Thane stepped forward. "Princess, we observed their actions during the attack. While their behavior was admirable, it does not change the fact that they cannot share emotions telepathically. How can we truly understand beings whose thoughts are closed to us?" "That is exactly the point," Princess Lirelei said, her eyes brightening. "We do not need to read their thoughts to understand their character. Their actions speak louder than any telepathic communication could." She gestured toward Jake and his crew. "Yesterday, when our palace was under attack, these humans could have hidden in safety. They could have protected only themselves. Instead, they chose to help our people. They risked their lives for strangers of a different species. They did this not because they were forced to by shared emotions, but because they decided it was right." Emperor Valdris leaned forward on his throne. "Continue, daughter." "I watched Commander Morrison carry an elderly Zephyrian to safety, even though he was tired and afraid. I saw Dr. Carter treat wounded civilians with her own medical supplies. Lieutenant Rodriguez supported our injured guards as if they were his own soldiers. Engineer Lang guided families through dangerous areas, using her skills to keep them safe." Princess Lirelei's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "But most importantly, I saw them work together without telepathy. They coordinated their actions through trust, training, and shared purpose. They achieved something remarkable. They acted as one mind while remaining individual beings." Jake felt a warmth spreading through his chest as he listened to her words. She had truly understood what made humans special. "This is what we can learn from humanity," the princess continued. "They show us that strength comes not from shared thoughts, but from shared values. Not from feeling the same emotions, but from choosing the same path despite different feelings." The hall fell silent as the counselors considered her words. Jake could see them looking at each other, and he suspected they were having intense telepathic discussions. Finally, Counselor Thane spoke again. "Princess, your observations are interesting. But even if we accept that humans have emotional depth, what can they offer our empire? We have technology far beyond theirs. We have powers they cannot match. What do they bring to an alliance?" Princess Lirelei smiled, and Jake saw her eyes turn that warm gold color. "They bring something we lack, Counselor. They bring resilience." "Explain." Our species has grown comfortable in our shared consciousness. We depend on mental connection for almost everything. But what happens when that connection is threatened? What happens when we face challenges that cannot be solved by sharing thoughts?" She gestured toward the repaired walls of the hall. "Yesterday's attack showed us our weakness. When faced with violence and chaos, many of our people froze. They could not function without their usual telepathic support." Jake remembered how the counselors had acted during the attack, standing paralyzed while his crew moved into action. "But the humans functioned perfectly," Princess Lirelei said. "They adapted to new circumstances instantly. They made decisions independently but worked toward the same goal. They showed us what it means to be strong as individuals and as a team." Emperor Valdris was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his mental voice was thoughtful. You believe humanity can teach us this resilience? I believe humanity can teach us many things, Father. Just as we can teach them about telepathic communication and mental harmony. Imagine what both our species could become if we learned from each other. The Emperor looked directly at Jake. Commander Morrison, you have heard my daughter's words. Do you believe your species would be interested in such an exchange of knowledge? Jake stepped forward, his heart beating fast. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Your Majesty, humanity would be honored to learn from the Zephyrian Empire. We offer not just our technology or our military strength, but our friendship. We believe that different species can accomplish more together than either could alone. And, what do you hope to gain from alliance with us? Jake thought carefully about his answer. We hope to learn, Your Majesty. To grow, to become better than we are now. We've always believed that meeting other intelligent species would help us understand our place in the universe. Even though we initially rejected you as emotionally inferior? Everyone makes mistakes based on incomplete information, Jake said simply. What matters is being willing to learn and change. Princess Lirale showed us that your people are capable of both. Emperor Valdris stood up from his throne, and Jake noticed that his skin was glowing brighter than before. Counselors, he said, addressing the assembled Zephyrians, I call for a formal vote. All in favor of accepting humanity's proposal for alliance? Jake held his breath as he watched the counselors. One by one, they raised their hands in the Zephyrian gesture of agreement. Even Counselor Thane, after a long moment of hesitation, raised his hand. The motion carries unanimously, the Emperor announced. Let it be recorded that this day marks the beginning of the Terran-Zephyrian alliance. The hall erupted in a sound Jake had never heard before, the Zephyrian equivalent of cheering. It was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, musical and beautiful. Princess Lirale approached Jake and his crew, her eyes shining with joy. Congratulations, Commander. You have given both our species a great gift. What gift is that? Jake asked. The chance to learn what we can become together. Over the next few days, Jake and his crew worked with Zephyrian officials to establish the framework for the new alliance. They arranged for cultural exchanges, scientific cooperation, and diplomatic protocols. But the most important moment came when Princess Lirale made an announcement that surprised everyone. I will be traveling to Earth as the first Zephyrian. Ambassador, she told Jake as they walked through the palace gardens one last time before his departure. That's wonderful, Jake said, but I have to ask, why you? You're the heir to the throne. She smiled, and Jake realized he would miss seeing her eyes change color. Because I want to continue learning about humanity. I want to understand how beings can be individuals and still care so deeply for each other. I want to learn how you transform pain into art, fear into courage, and differences into strength. And what will you teach us? I will teach you about mental harmony, about the peace that comes from truly understanding another being's thoughts. But mostly, I will teach you that there are many ways to be strong, and all of them have value. Jake extended his hand in the human gesture of friendship. Princess Lirale looked at it for a moment, then reached out and clasped it firmly. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For showing me that the greatest strength comes not from sharing the same thoughts, but from choosing to help each other despite having different ones. As the UES Horizon prepared to leave Zephyros Prime, Jake stood on the bridge watching the Crystal City grow smaller on the screen. His crew was excited about returning home with news of humanity's first alien alliance. But Jake was thinking about something else. Commander, Amy said, you look thoughtful. I was just thinking about what the princess said. About strength. Coming from choosing to help each other despite our differences. Good lesson, Ben said from his station. Yeah, Sophie added. Maybe that's what the universe needs more of. Species that are willing to look past their differences and see what they can accomplish together. Jake nodded, watching the star.